Welcome back to my scene study series, where I analyze scenes from The Last of Us Part 2 in order to deepen our understanding of this story, as well as certain facets of storytelling in general. Today I'm going to be talking about a scene which has been requested a few times, and that is this scene between Abby and Mel.
You're a piece of shit, Abby.
I think Mel is one of the most misunderstood and over-hated characters in this game, so I'm hoping my thoughts will recontextualize her, and also shed some light on where this confrontation actually comes from. We'll really need to analyze their relationship as a whole in order to properly study this scene, so let's go over what has happened between them chronologically leading up to this point, with a particular emphasis on Mel's side of the story, since we're already pretty familiar with Abby's. When you first gain control of young Abby in the tracking lesson chapter, you can actually find two artifacts already in her backpack. One of them is a letter and drawing from Owen, and the other is a thank you note from Mel. It says, "Abby, I wanted to say thanks again. Your dad has been an amazing mentor as I transition to the more complicated procedures. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you vouching for me. I think we should grab some booze and get wasted ASAP. XO, Mel." As we know, Abby's father Jerry was a surgeon with the Fireflies, and this letter suggests that he trained other medical personnel, including Mel, apparently at Abby's recommendation. The tone of this letter is friendly and familiar, and it seems like at that point, Mel and Abby were good friends. 2 years later, when Ellie returns to St. Mary's Hospital to find answers, she finds this recording in the operating room.
Most people have left already. I don't know which group I'm gonna join. I was one of the ones that wanted to go after the smuggler and the girl. They said, even if we found her, or by some miracle found someone else that's immune, it'd make no difference. Because the only person who could develop a vaccine is dead.
Though this hasn't been confirmed, I firmly believe the voice on this recorder is Mel's. It sounds just like Ashley Birch, who plays Mel in the game, and while sometimes games will use already cast actors for other incidental parts, it seems unlikely they would do this for such a significant story beat, especially since Ashley Birch's voice is so recognizable. Since we know Mel was one of Jerry's students and studied under him at the hospital, it makes sense that her belongings would have ended up in that room. It also makes sense that she would have strong feelings about the outcome of Joel's destruction at the hospital, especially since Mel's mentor was killed in the process. In this interview from 2020, Laura Bailey confirmed that earlier on in the development process, there had been an additional Abby flashback which showed the Salt Lake crew either en route to or arriving in Seattle.
Originally in some of the flashback sequences, you were going to see Abby's going to the wolves from the Fireflies, and
Sure.
It wasn't ever like a conscious choice to go to the wolves. She was at that point an orphan, right? She was only 15, I think, maybe younger when everything happened, and that was where she was sent. Isaac was a Firefly and was a friend of her father's, so that's why she went there.
This dynamic is hinted at in the first aquarium flashback with Abby and Owen.
Owen, we have to go back.
We will, once you see this.
These people are just starting to warm up to us. You keep showing up late to everything, it'll seem disrespectful.
They know what we've been through. We got at least, 2 more months of sympathy before we have to go full wolf.
Owen,
What are they gonna do? Kick out a bunch of displaced Fireflies who have nowhere else to go?
maybe? I don't want to find out.
Think of it like this, then. We're on patrol. We'll just tell them we ran into some infected.
They're so... Owen,
Just come see this thing.
If the voice on the recorder is indeed Mel, it's interesting that she seemed to have had a choice in where she went following the massacre. Did Mel simply follow her friends to Seattle because they were all being sent there? Or did she actually choose it for herself? It's interesting to consider what the other options might have been, and how different Mel's life could have turned out had she decided to go somewhere else. In any case, Mel ended up with the Salt Lake crew in Seattle. A year later, Abby and Owen broke up due to Abby's inability to stop pursuing revenge at any cost. 1 year and 8 months after that, Owen started dating Mel. I figured this out using some very advanced and sophisticated calculations based on the fact that the breakup was 3 years prior to Abby's Seattle days, and during the winter visit flashback, which was 4 months prior, Owen said he and Mel were celebrating their 1-year anniversary. I swear it makes sense, just bear with me. During the winter visit flashback, Abby and Owen briefly discussed his relationship with Mel. Though he downplayed it a bit, perhaps for Abby's sake, he had in fact spent a lot of time decorating the aquarium for their anniversary, specifically with Christmas decorations, because Mel loves it. It was also hinted that there is some tension between the three of them when Owen was reluctant to put Abby's name up on the scoreboard following the archery minigame.
Put my score up. I'll do better next time.
I'll do it later.
Oh my... Are you nervous that Mel's gonna find out I was here?
What? No. She doesn't care.
Then put me up on the board.
Jeez. Calm down.
Owen's hesitation here was likely due to the fact that he knew Mel definitely wouldn't be okay with his ex-girlfriend hanging out alone with him at the aquarium, especially on their anniversary. Since this was Abby's first time back to the aquarium since the day they broke up, her randomly showing up at Owen's home away from home was bound to raise some questions with Mel, especially since the aquarium is a significant landmark in Owen and Abby's relationship too. Later on in this flashback, Abby informed Owen that she had spoken to the rest of the Salt Lake crew about the trip to Jackson, and they'd all agreed to go, including Mel. Once they arrived in Jackson, Owen told Abby that Mel is pregnant. It's never specified whether Mel already knew she was pregnant before going to Jackson or whether she discovered it on the trip. I had also always assumed that Mel had told Owen the night before, and that's why he went off wandering on his own. But it's interesting to consider that maybe Owen had known for a while. Maybe they were keeping it a secret so as not to burden the mission, just like Dina did with Ellie. Regardless, seeing the size of Jackson was ultimately what prompted him to inform Abby of Mel's pregnancy. After Abby led Tommy and Joel back to the chalet, Mel introduced herself to Tommy. At that point, nobody in that room knew what was about to happen except for Abby, so Mel was genuinely being friendly. When Abby confronted Joel and he demonstrated no remorse, Abby ordered Mel to tourniquet his leg. This is a technique used to staunch the flow of blood to prevent someone from bleeding out, and Abby had decided at that point that she wanted to prolong Joel's life long enough to kill him slowly. If you look at Mel's face, it's clear that she was not on board with this, but did so under duress. By ordering Mel to do this, Abby directly implicated her in the ensuing torture. By the time Ellie arrived on the scene, Mel and Owen had left the room while Abby continued torturing Joel. Once the deed was done, there was a debate about what to do with the witnesses. Mel advocated for killing them, likely more out of fear of retribution than spite.
We can't have loose ends.
Ultimately, Abby made the call to leave Ellie and Tommy alive, a decision which would come back to haunt them all. When we picked up with Abby in Seattle 6 weeks later, Abby wasn't on speaking terms with Owen or Mel, and upon being called up to the fob, Abby was incensed to discover that Mel would be coming along for the ride.
Mel's coming with us.
Manny, why are you doing this to me?
Because I care about both of you. And I'm tired of all the bullshit.
Does she know I'm on this drive?
She does.
And she's cool with it?
Yeah. It's an opportunity for you two to finally move forward.
We've barely said a word to each other since Jackson. I'm just supposed to pretend that didn't happen?
Of course not. You guys need to talk about it.
She wanted Joel dead as much as the rest of us.
But she's not like the rest of us. She hasn't hurt people like that before.
She kills scars all the time.
Not the way we kill Joe. Don't forget, we are grunts. She's a medic. Come on, Abby. She's family.
Meanwhile, Mel had been wrestling with her own complicated feelings following Joel's murder, alongside dealing with an absent partner. Owen had been distant, almost avoidant, and Mel was understandably concerned. After a tense greeting where Abby tried various tactics to convince Mel to stay behind, the three of them headed out. On their way to pick up Alice, we learned that Mel and Owen had recently been moved to a new section of the stadium to live with other young families. Mel also told Abby that Owen was out on rotation with somebody named Danny. You can also overhear a conversation between Manny and Mel where she expressed that eventually she would be content to focus on being a family doctor rather than act as a field medic, an indication that Mel was re-evaluating her position within the WLF and was feeling a desire to distance herself from further violence.
Well, I guess you get to stay away from the combat.
Yeah, if that's what you're into.
I'd be happy staying put, I think. Just treating families.
You'd miss fucking up scars.
I don't think so.
Instigated by Manny, Mel and Abby made awkward small talk on the way to the fob. Mel asked if Abby was sleeping well, suggesting that Abby's sleep troubles were known to her. Abby said she'd just wear herself out physically by taking on some extra assignments. Mel then revealed that Owen had been doing the same thing.
I haven't seen him in like 2 weeks. He keeps picking up open assignments. Has he talked to you? Did he say anything, or...?
No, we're still not. I mean, I seen him in the mess hall, but we walk around each other. Jackson shook him. You know, I wouldn't read too much into it.
I imagine it was a hit to Mel's pride to have to ask her boyfriend's ex if she knew anything about what was going on with him, but Abby, as far as we know, responded truthfully. Owen hadn't talked to her about what was going on with him. Abby deduced that Owen was just shaken by Jackson, and she told Mel as much. After being ambushed by Seraphites, the small squad had to make it the rest of the way to the fob on foot. During this trek, they had this conversation.
God, remember when we could pass through this area without getting jumped by scars?
Getting nostalgic about the truce? Easier days, huh?
Too easy. We let our guard down, and they strung up an entire squad.
That was in retaliation to us shooting those kids.
Okay, but those kids attacked our guys. What would you do?
I don't know, not riddle them with bullets?
I'd rather save our people.
Manny, they're kids. It's not their fault.
Not our fault either. Those deaths are on them.
Okay.
This conversation is a direct example of the very concept Manny was explaining to Abby earlier, that Mel is not like the rest of them. Manny and Abby, the WLF's top soldiers, are well-versed in violence and brutality. But Mel is a doctor. Though they live in a violent world and she has had to participate in it, it's suggested that she does so only out of necessity rather than pleasure. She also has her own child on the way, so listening to her friends condemn children, Seraphites notwithstanding, was likely startling to her. Nevertheless, there is a contradiction in the way Mel talks about the Seraphite kids versus the fact that she advocated for disposing of Tommy and Ellie, who were innocent in that scenario. The confrontation between a WLF squad and some Seraphite kids didn't involve her or any of the Salt Lake crew, so she was able to discuss that situation at a distance, using hypotheticals based on how she'd ideally behave. They were all involved in Joel's torture and murder, however, and it's much harder to maintain the moral high ground when your own life and the lives of your loved ones are at stake. At that time, she actually took on Manny's point of view, which was to protect her own people. This goes to show that no situation is black and white, that perspective matters, and that humans are full of contradictions even within themselves. This doesn't make Mel a bad person, just a person. At one point, Abby and Mel were separated from Manny and Alice and forced to work together to reunite the squad. Here they had a series of tense conversations, some with an attempt at lightheartedness and some decidedly not.
Hey, why have you been avoiding me?
I wasn't avoiding you.
Come on, you've barely said anything to me since Jackson.
I don't know. I guess I was shook by Jackson, too.
You don't think Joel deserved what he got?
I think he deserved worse. I just wish I didn't take part in it.
I get it. What kind of a person could do that, right?
I'm not saying that.
Let's see if there's a way to the hatch.
Abby's reactivity here was a blatant indication of her growing sense of guilt for what she'd done. She was projecting an accusation that wasn't there. Internally, she'd been reading Mel's and Owen's distance since Jackson as judgmental and hypocritical, given that in her mind she did what she believed they all wanted, and what they knew she was committed to doing for the past 4 years.
Why do I have to feel I've committed some felony, doing what I always swore I would do?
But the reality is that no one was expecting Abby to go to the level of violence that she did. They hadn't even been expecting to find Joel and Jackson at all. The tip she had received was about Tommy's whereabouts. Mel's responses here were more about her own involvement than Abby's, despite how Abby interpreted them. Mel was still trying to maintain her more pacifistic stance, but the truth is she participated in something that violates her own morals and now has to wrestle with that. While in theory, the thought of getting revenge against Joel for what he did made sense to them all, it's a different story entirely to have actually enacted it. This is the lesson they each have to learn in their own way. Despite this uncomfortable interaction, Mel and Abby's friendship still managed to poke through.
Reminds me a little of Owen's boat.
Is he still trying to fix that thing up?
Yeah. But he says he'll be done any day now.
Any day now. Everybody's got their obsession.
Yeah, like me and dog toys.
Yup. And me with my stupid coins.
Following a shootout with the Seraphites that Abby and her squad very nearly lost, they were rescued by some WLF soldiers who were in the area. On their way to the fob, Abby discovered a wound on Mel's back, and so they dropped her off at the medical tent before reporting in.
You did all right back there.
It was almost a compliment.
When we next saw Mel, she was being stitched up and scolded by Nora, who was begging her to take it easy.
You guys need to convince this girl to relax.
Hey, Mel. Relax.
You got it.
When Abby learned that Owen had gone missing, she disobeyed orders from Isaac in order to go find him at the aquarium without informing Mel. We'll learn later on that after Abby's disappearance had been reported to Isaac, he rounded up and interrogated the remaining Salt Lake crew, including Mel, who Nora claimed Isaac was particularly tough on. On Abby's way to the aquarium, she was captured by Seraphites and subsequently worked with a pair of runaway Seraphite kids to get to safety. She finally found Owen on his boat, and after an intense conversation, an analysis for which is already up on my channel, Owen and Abby had sex. The following morning, while Abby was out searching for the 2 kids she had left behind, Mel showed up at the aquarium looking for Owen, having figured that's where she'd find him, just like Abby had done. She may have even suspected that Abby would be there too. After all, from Mel's perspective, she had recently learned after being interrogated by Isaac that both Owen and Abby had gone AWOL, hours after she confided in Abby about Owen acting strange and distant. On top of being concerned about Owen's safety, the whole situation probably seemed quite suspect to Mel. I also highly doubt that upon her arrival, Owen had told her that Abby had been there too, and then Abby herself showed up, with 2 Seraphite kids in tow no less. Mel and Owen were understandably quite taken aback by this. Just the day before, Mel and Abby had been arguing over Seraphite kids' culpability in the turf war, and now Abby was asking Mel to examine a Seraphite kid's broken arm. Neither of them were privy to Abby's internal struggle at this point, and she wasn't explaining any of her actions, so each of them were left to interpret her behavior in their own way. And of course, by this point, Mel was definitely suspecting that something was up. When Abby and Lev returned from their perilous journey across Seattle with the medical supplies needed for Yara's surgery, Mel performed a successful amputation on her, effectively saving her life. This scene takes place the following morning, after Abby had had a good night's sleep for the first time in 4 years. Female friendships can be complicated. The depiction of Mel and Abby's relationship demonstrates how resentment can be left to fester under the surface for years without being properly addressed until it eventually explodes in a friendship-ending argument. Now, obviously, not all female friendships are going to face this problem, but speaking from experience, it does happen. So here's where we're going to have to talk about jealousy. And no, I'm not just talking about each of their respective relationships with Owen. It goes far, far deeper than that. At the beginning of the game, Mel followed Abby across the country just to watch her torture a man to death, and to have Abby directly implicate her in said torture. Now, Mel has just performed surgery on a child of the enemy at Abby's insistence, and she doesn't know why. This is now the second time Abby has taken advantage of Mel's medical skills for her own agenda, and as I mentioned in the previous section, because Abby isn't explaining her behavior, Mel is going to interpret it with the information that she has. At this point, Mel has no reason to believe that Abby's actions aren't selfishly motivated, because as far as Mel is concerned, all of Abby's actions so far have been selfish.
Make me a list. I'll go to the hospital, I'll get whatever you need.
It'll take you all day to get there.
I don't mind.
It's not about you, Abby. She doesn't have a couple of days.
This last line of Mel's may at first seem like a throwaway, but it actually says a lot about her sentiments towards Abby at this point. It's not about you. The implication is that Abby is centering herself, as Mel has often perceived her to do. From Mel's perspective, Abby had been all about her revenge, her justice, her mission, for 4 years, pushing away everyone who interferes. She led her friends across the country only to subject them to a horrific torture none of them were anticipating, which caused Mel's boyfriend to start acting strange and distant. At this point, Mel may even suspect that Abby had been lying during their conversation the previous day, that maybe she had some plan to rekindle her relationship with Owen now that she's gotten her revenge. Not to mention Mel herself has a child on the way. She and Owen are about to become a family, and then Abby shows up at the aquarium with 2 kids whom Owen promptly invites to join them in Santa Barbara. Mel has no idea about the internal journey Abby is on, or that it is in fact very personal and has nothing to do with Owen. She only has the information that is readily available to her. All she sees are Abby's actions, which are incredibly out of character for her, and again, Mel has no reason to believe that her intentions are pure after everything she's witnessed from Abby over the years. Remember that although it was Abby's father who was murdered that night at St. Mary's Hospital, the rest of the Salt Lake crew were there too, and they were also affected by the losses the Fireflies suffered that night. They also had their entire lives turned upside down. We know that Mel was close with Abby's father too. He was her mentor, and for all we know, he could have been a father figure in Mel's life too.
Abby, this reminds me of your dad's greenhouse.
Shouldn't. All these plants are alive.
Good point.
You know what? This is good. You two needed a bonding moment.
Shut up,
Manny.
It's worth mentioning that the bonding moment Manny is referring to is Mel and Abby connecting over Abby's father, which is also exactly what they do in this conversation.
Look, fob, sweet fob. Almost there.
Bet we can cut through that rail yard.
You want to get off the roof first?
Please.
kind of hard to imagine you being afraid of anything.
I'm not as fearless as you think.
Oh, please.
Like, I could never do the surgery stuff you do. Be too freaked out about fucking it up.
You think I don't feel the same way?
Well, for what it's worth, my dad always said you were his best student.
He did? Well, he always said he was an idiot. Come on.
The following are lines of dialogue that unfortunately were cut from the game, but offer great insight into how Abby may have felt about Mel's behavior following Joel's murder, as well as the relationship between Mel and her father.
And what's Owen's excuse? Well, I don't appreciate them making me feel like a monster. If she doesn't talk to me, I'm not talking to her. You're gonna have a very awkward ride. She should have been on board and then fucking turn on me because I go through with it. She doesn't just spend years talking about how Joel should pay and then I know she wanted it. What the fuck did she expect? She spent more time with my dad than I did.
It's clear to me why these lines were ultimately cut, because they are a little too on the nose in terms of Abby's sentiments towards Owen and Mel following Joel's murder. The resentment comes through anyway, especially in her conversations with Manny and Mel on the way to the fob, and all these cut lines are essentially the subtext of those conversations. But this particular line stands out as especially pertinent to the topic of this video, and offers much insight into Mel and Abby's relationship in particular.
She spent more time with my dad than I did.
When the Salt Lake crew were living at St. Mary's Hospital with the Fireflies, Mel was in her element. She was an up-and-coming surgeon, studying under the leader of the facility, and though Abby also grew up in that environment, surrounded by medical personnel, she herself didn't follow that path. Perhaps deep down, she was jealous that Mel was spending so much time with her father, that they had this connection over medicine that Abby didn't have with Jerry. And losing her father, I'm sure, only exacerbated that resentment because Abby won't ever get that time back. Time her father spent with someone else. On the flip side, when the Salt Lake crew were sent to the WLF, suddenly Abby was in her element. She began training, turning her body into a weapon, and moved up the ranks to become one of Isaac's top soldiers. Abby is revered amongst the wolves, even if it means some people fear her. The WLF values ruthlessness and ferocity. One can deduce that they most likely value their soldiers over their medics. Mel, who went from being the star pupil of the leader of the Firefly facility, is perhaps jealous that Abby is now the star soldier of the leader of the WLF. All of this resentment is sitting under the surface of the whole love triangle between Owen, Abby, and Mel. And on top of that, there's the fact that Owen isn't over Abby, and that had already been cause for jealousy and contention in Mel even before Abby showed up at the aquarium in the winter visit, as evidenced by Owen's response to the scoreboard debacle. Owen and Abby only dated for about a year when they were teenagers. Their relationship was stunted by Abby's insatiable thirst for revenge, but an air of what if hung over their relationship for the next 3 years. By the time Abby actually got that revenge and could even begin to think about intimacy again, there was a new obstacle in the way of any hopes for a future with Owen, and that was Mel. From Abby's perspective, while she suffered and struggled to avenge her father for several years, Owen moved on with someone else, someone who was also close with her father, and who Abby may perceive as having robbed her of her time with him. Someone who, based on those cut voice lines, also desired justice for Jerry's death, but didn't put the work in to actually get it. Abby did, and then Mel judged her for it. So it could be that Abby perceived Mel as having taken both of the most important men in her life from her. Like I said, female friendships can be complex. I think this game did an excellent job of portraying that tension, because at first glance this blow-up of Mel's may not make sense, but when you peel back the layers, the years of built-up resentment and bad feelings that Mel and Abby may not even be fully aware of or properly able to identify, it all starts to come together. In storytelling, the given circumstances are everything that has happened to the characters prior to a scene, which inform and influence their motivations and actions. These can include more immediate circumstances, as in one character has just completed changing a patient's medical bandages, and the other has just woken from her first peaceful dream in 4 years, to the culmination of a gradual building of resentment that is finally about to reach a boiling point. So as we go into the scene, keep in mind that Mel has just performed a grueling surgery that she suspects is Abby's attempt to get in her boyfriend's good books, and Abby has just had the first peaceful dream about her father in 4 years. She has made a good choice, turned a new leaf, and is attempting to redeem herself for years of bad decisions and darkness, but Mel isn't aware of any of that. A desired outcome is essentially how each character wants the scene to end, or what they want to obtain from their scene partner before the scene concludes. Characters are always seeking something from each other in a scene, whether it be getting the other to do or say something specific in order to satisfy a more tangible want, or seeking something from the other which will fulfill a more subconscious need, or both. Characters pursuing their desired outcome is what keeps them active and engaged in any given scene, and the best scenes are ones where the characters' desired outcomes are at odds with each other, as this generates conflict. In the case of Mel and Abby in this scene, their respective desired outcomes are most definitely at odds. Abby, having just woken from a peaceful dream which proved to her that she is finally on the right path and is feeling good about herself for the first time in 4 years, is possibly expecting Mel to acknowledge that Abby has done the right thing. Abby is seeking validation from someone close to her, who has known her and seen her struggle for years, and possibly wants to be told that she really is a good person despite her poor decisions. Maybe Abby even wants to celebrate with Mel, like, hey, look at this good thing we just did together. Mel, on the other hand, wants to confront Abby about what has just happened. She doesn't want to ask questions, she doesn't want to hear Abby out, she has come to her own conclusions, and she doesn't like them. She wants Abby to corroborate the assumptions Mel has made, for Abby to admit that this is all a hoax, that her motives are conniving, that everything she said to Mel the previous day about Owen was a lie. She wants Abby to admit what her true intentions are because she isn't buying this whole act, as she calls it. So ultimately, while Abby is hoping Mel will tell her she is a good person, Mel wants to get Abby to admit that she is a bad one. Okay, now that we have gone over the context, the given circumstances, the desired outcome, and the underlying issues going on between Mel and Abby, we can finally analyze their dialogue from what they say to what they actually mean. The unspoken underlying meaning to any given line of dialogue is called subtext, and in this game, as well as most pieces of good dramatic writing, the subtext is as rich and important as the actual words being spoken aloud.
We broke the rules, that's all we care about.
Owen? Just me. What are you still doing up?
I was changing Yara's bandages.
Can't believe she's on her feet already.
Yeah, well, scars are tough.
What are they fighting about?
Fuck you, Yara. I wouldn't leave you behind.
Lev doesn't want to leave Seattle. Owen invited them to come to Santa Barbara.
The first part of this line leaves a question. Why would Lev be leaving Seattle? And then Mel elaborates in the second part of the line. Note that Mel specifically says Owen invited them to come to Santa Barbara, which in and of itself implies that Mel is going too. She could have said, Owen invited them to come to Santa Barbara with us, but she left the last two words out. Perhaps she wanted to see how Abby would respond, if she would incriminate herself, and perhaps Mel is still working up the courage to actually confront her.
That is very Owen. I figured you'd have talked him out of going by now.
Maybe Abby could really mean, I'd hoped you'd have talked him out of going by now. She may also be fishing for more information, because Abby doesn't yet know at this point that Owen is still really planning to leave. She hasn't spoken to him since the previous day. Mel is also now implying that they're all going to leave, and maybe Abby wants further clarification. To Mel, though, this could come across as an accusation. I figured you'd have gotten in the way of his plans by now, the way you always do.
Actually, I'm going with them. But not if you come.
This line implies that Owen and Mel have discussed her going with him, though maybe she wanted to have this confrontation with Abby before committing to it. Mel may not have needed much convincing about going in theory, as she also seems to be disillusioned with the WLF, but now she is drawing the line in the sand. Her condition for going with Owen is Abby being left behind, and if Abby goes, Mel will stay. After this scene, Owen and Abby will have their conversation where he invites her to Santa Barbara, suggesting they can make it all work. To me, this implies that the condition Mel is telling Abby about here, she did not voice to Owen. She is guilting Abby into choosing instead. Maybe because it's probably much easier and less painful for Mel to make Abby responsible for all of this rather than make Owen choose himself, likely because she knows what his choice would be if she did. Mel also doesn't know that Owen and Abby slept together, so at this point she doesn't have any concrete evidence to blame Owen for anyway, other than maybe her gut instinct.
What?
Abby is genuinely taken aback here. This is the first time Abby is hearing about the possibility of her going to Santa Barbara too. I'm not sure if she'd even considered it at this point, but the fact that Mel is bringing this up implies that Owen has mentioned it, at least as a possibility. Given Owen and Abby's encounter on his boat, their rescue of the Seraphite siblings, and their conversation about looking for the light again, it seems Owen has assumed they are on the same page, but they haven't talked about it yet.
He may fall for your little act with these kids, but I don't.
So this is Mel calling bullshit on everything that's happened over the past day. Referring to Abby's attempt to save these kids as an act implies that she thinks there was a selfish or even nefarious intent behind her actions, and at this point, Mel has no reason to believe otherwise.
There's nothing to fall for.
Abby is being honest here. There is no ploy, there is no deception. Her saving Lev and Yara had absolutely nothing to do with Owen. She has no interest in trying to get him back, even if maybe at one time she did.
Isaac's top scar killer suddenly had a change of heart? Nothing to do with Owen, right?
Mel is putting Abby in her place by reminding her she's one of Isaac's top soldiers and is responsible for however many Seraphite deaths. Just 2 days ago, they were discussing the other Seraphite kids who were killed by the WLF, and Abby saw no issue with it. So to Mel, this change of heart has all seemed very sudden and suspect. She doesn't know about Abby's dreams, her guilt about killing Joel. She just sees somebody whom she suspects is using these kids as a way to impress Owen in order to get him back. Maybe Mel could even see this as Abby's attempt to start a weird little family with Owen, when Mel herself has his kid on the way.
I haven't always done the right thing.
You're a piece of shit, Abby.
You always have been.
I think the rest of Abby's line here was probably going to be, but I'm trying to do it now. I'm trying to be better, to do better. All she can do is try. Abby realizes she has much to atone for, but Mel at this point doesn't want to hear it. She'd only hear excuses, not sincerity. Abby doesn't fight back because she knows it's true. She has been a piece of shit. Not always, like Mel says, but at least for the past few years. One good deed doesn't make up for all of her past mistakes. It doesn't make up for the trauma she's imparted on her friends and the lives she has claimed. Rescuing 2 Seraphite kids isn't going to absolve her of the blood on her hands, and Abby has to reckon with that. The "you always have been" part of Mel's line was intentionally hurtful, and may reflect the amount of time Mel has been harboring resentment and bad feelings towards Abby. They've known each other since they were teenagers at least, and used to be good friends. Mel knows that Abby used to be a good person, but has over the years watched her devolve into a brutal, ruthless killer whom she may no longer recognize and no longer wants to associate with.
I'm done with you. You want to do right by these kids? Get out of their lives before you screw them over too.
This line implies that Mel believes that Abby breaks everything she touches. Mel is basically telling her, you screwed me over. She probably blames Abby for the fact that she and Owen now have to run away, to upend their lives again and leave all their friends behind to go to Santa Barbara. It's all a result of Abby's revenge that she couldn't and wouldn't let go, that she implicated them all in. And at this point, they don't even know yet the full consequences of that revenge. They don't know that Ellie and Tommy are picking them off one by one. Mel has seen many lives ruined or ended because of Abby over the years, and she's telling Abby to leave these kids alone lest she do the same thing to them. She is severing all ties with Abby and believes her to be beyond redemption, and she is projecting all of the hurt that she has experienced over the years right back onto Abby. Besides the scenes where Abby finds her father's, Mel's, and Owen's bodies, this is the only other time we see Abby cry in the whole game. Because she is trying to be better. She is reckoning with her mistakes. She is trying to redeem herself, but she may now be wondering if she ever can. She hates herself, and Mel has just confirmed that maybe she has a good reason for that. She had hoped someone as close to her as Mel would recognize her efforts in order to corroborate the change she has been feeling within herself. It's an incredibly painful feeling to have your good intentions met with such contempt and skepticism, and to have someone assume the worst of you when you really are trying to better yourself. This is why it's so significant when Yara later tells Abby that she is a good person, having overheard the argument with Mel.
Mel's wrong, you know. You're a good person.
You don't know me.
I know enough.
Yara doesn't know Abby's past. She only knows what she has seen of Abby thus far, and she sees that Abby's intentions are good. She saw Abby save their lives in the forest. She heard from Lev about their conversations on the way to the hospital. She knows that she is only alive because Abby insisted on getting the medical supplies needed for the surgery. So the validation Abby needed but didn't receive from Mel, Yara gives to her in the next scene. And Abby almost can't accept it because Mel has reminded her of why she hates herself so deeply. But Yara gives her back that glimmer of hope.
Those were your fucking people.
Hey, you're my people.
I hope that this analysis has shed some light on this nuanced and layered scene, as well as on Mel as a character. It's unfortunate that we only ever really see Mel in a state of discomfort, because I do think she is a sympathetic and complicated character who didn't deserve what happens to her. As I mentioned earlier, female friendships can be extremely complex, and I think Naughty Dog did a little too good of a job capturing that in this scene. Anybody who has experienced a blowout fight with a good friend knows how painful it can be. But like in most scenes in this game, we have to consider the circumstances and the subtext in order to fully grasp what's going on between these characters. They live in a world none of us can really comprehend living in, and they all learned to fight for survival far before they learned to communicate effectively. And so things often go left unsaid until it's too late, or almost too late, to recover.
I haven't always done the right thing, but I would like to try.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please interact with it as it really helps me out. Let me know in the comments which scene you think I should analyze next. I might pick one on Ellie's side next just to vary it up a little. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you want to be notified when the next video gets posted, and follow me on TikTok for more The Last of Us content. Until next time, endure and survive.